So what would it be like to fly from the Earth to the moon to get this grand adventure and get a view like this as you're approaching the lunar surface? Well, back in 1969, these three guys did just that. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. And as they came around the moon, they could even see a view like this. Whew, that'd be pretty sweet. Why don't you stay up all night with me and we'll go check out the moon. So welcome to All Night with Dean Regas. I'm your astronomer, Dean Regas, and we like to talk about stuff in outer space. And for me, this is the adventure of a lifetime, to fly from the Earth to the moon. And so we're going to hitch a ride with the Apollo 11 astronauts as they went all the way that way, and look at some of the cool pictures and kind of relive exactly some of the details behind the trip. Because I know it's kind of like you've seen pictures of it, you've seen videos of it, you've seen them like hopping across the surface of the moon, but there's like some other little hidden anecdotes to this. And now, first off, I gotta say, this was before I was born, so I can only kind of relive this as watching it like with you all, as to, kind of looking at back in the past. And I'm already starting off with a little thing to kind of mess with you. Is this isn't a picture that they took. This is a picture from the Apollo 8 mission, which came before the Apollo 11 mission. And that was the first time any humans went around the backside of the moon. And so it's kind of like that robotic Artemis mission that went around the backside of the moon, and they just did very recently. But this was with the actual people, and the three astronauts went on Apollo 8 and then rounded the moon and got this like iconic picture. And in some ways, to me, this is like more impressive than the actual walking on the moon. I don't want to gloss over all, Neil Armstrong's are awesome, and yeah. But this was like really cool to actually have this picture, to see the entire Earth in one place. And I mean, this is everybody all your stuff all in one place. And this picture really changed people's lives. It kind of started the environmental movement. It started kind of the idea that we're all kind of like connected on this little blue marble. Now, we're going to go into a little bit more, but all right, I guess since I'm getting kind of deep already, the other thing that it does for me is you see where we are, and look at the comparison to the thing that's down below it. The moon itself, the moon's surface, doesn't look very good. Doesn't look inviting. It looks barren, desolate, and in the distance is the only place where we can live. And so it kind of makes you feel a little good about home also. But let's get to the moon anyway. And because we're going to be hitching a ride with this guy's footprint. So this is Neil. And of course, a lot of people know who Neil is. This is Neil Armstrong, first person to walk on the moon. Who was the second person to walk on the moon? I think a lot of people know that. This is Buzz Aldrin. And just to give you a little feel for what it's like to go to the moon, this is the get-up that you have to wear. This is the suit that you have to bring with you. And it's you got to bring all your food, all your water with you, all your air. And more importantly, I never thought about this, is that, you go to the moon, I would assume it's just going to be like freezing cold. But when the sunlight is on you, when it's daytime, and that's the only time they went was on the daytime side, it could be about 200 degrees above zero. And so 200 degrees, they're actually wearing this suit to keep cool. So kind of a little extra tidbit to throw in there. Now, how do you get to the moon? You got to have a gigantic, humongous rocket. And this is the Saturn V rocket, next to great landmarks like Statue of Liberty. Oh, I guess that was it. Okay, Statue of Liberty. So it's bigger than the Statue of Liberty. This was the biggest rocket we'd ever made up until the Artemis rocket that just went off. No, actually, it's the one guy, what's his face? He did the SpaceX thing. That was the one that's bigger than this one. But anyway, let's just stick with this one. Saturn V rocket is awesome. It is humongous. 360 something feet tall, so the size of a building. So that's the whole feat, is you got to have this building launch into space. But the whole thing doesn't go all the way to the moon. It's just that top part. So it goes in stages, and that top part is what actually makes it to the moon itself. up in the command module, service module, lunar module. That's the place where the actual astronauts are hanging out. So to get the rocket into place, they built it on site there in Florida in this giant hangar, and then they roll it out of the hangar on this thing, the crawler. And I remember, like, as a kid seeing this thing, like, it was sitting around, at least I vaguely remember it. And I just remember my dad saying, oh, see this thing? It's like one of the biggest movable things, and it can roll at a top speed of 1 mile an hour. And I was like, yeah, 1 mile an hour, that's kind of lame. But now I think about it, moving a whole rocket 1 mile an hour, it seems fast enough. You got plenty of time to send it out to the launch pad. Now, when this launched, this was like a huge cultural phenomenon. Like, people would come around the country to see this. Everybody was tuning in, watching on TV. And then here's the launch as it's going up into space. So this building is launching off into space with 3 astronauts in the top: Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. And so here's some of the pictures from that day in July 1969 as they're blasting off to the moon. So cool. So the launch went flawless. They're up in space and they're kicking it into high gear and heading towards the moon. Now, here's your commander. This is Neil Armstrong. And so he is the most famous one because he was the first one to walk on the moon. Then you have second in command. You got Buzz Aldrin there as well. He and Neil would go down to the surface of the moon, while the third crew person, this is Michael Collins, he would stay in orbit around the moon itself. So they launch off of the Earth, circle around the Earth a few times, kick it into high gear, head to the moon. And to get to the moon takes about 3 days. So they're in this teeny tiny little spacecraft, 3 astronauts kind of in this little tin can, and they're there for 3 days flying through space. So in that time frame, they're weightless, they're eating really bad food, they got their tang, they got their like spreadable stuff, they're squirting stuff in their mouths. You gotta sleep there, you gotta go to the bathroom there. Man, there's a lot of stuff about space travel you don't really think about. But if you want to think about how they go to the bathroom, don't think about it too hard. That's all I'm saying. But anyway, 3 days to get to the moon, not too bad. In fact, I think some of the pictures, they kind of look like they're a little scruffy around there. I think this might have been later in the mission for him. But anyway, 3 days to get to the moon. And then when they get to the moon, well, they have to separate. And so Michael Collins ends up hanging out in this portion of the module while Buzz and Neil go down to the surface. So they separate while Michael Collins is circling around the moon. So he gets this great view of the surface from low moon orbit. But he also becomes like the loneliest astronaut in space. As the 2 guys, Neil and Buzz, go down to the surface, he's alone circling. And one of the things, Michael Collins doesn't get a lot of as much attention as the other 2, but I like to think about him just a little bit, because if there was a problem in the descent where Neil and Buzz could not get back up to rendezvous with him, Michael would have to head home by himself. I mean, there's no rescue. There was no extra plan to go pick them up. This was their one and only way to do it. So fly to the moon, circle around the moon. Neil and Buzz go down in this thing. This is the lander. So there they are in this lander. I don't know if you can see them in the windows. Probably not. But this is the lander as it comes down the surface. They were going to go down to the surface, then back up to rendezvous with Michael Collins, and then the 3 of them head back home. So when they're coming down, I know I'm kind of glossing over some stuff because they're already on the ground. Okay, well, before they land on the ground, there is some problems. And where they're coming to land was supposed to be nice and flat, nice and smooth. We sent these survey things to look at the surf side of the moon where they're going to land. Should be nice and easy. Problem is where they were coming down was this boulder field, this unexpected boulder field. So Neil Armstrong had to take manual controls at the very last couple minutes. And so he had to guide the craft down onto the surface. And he had to kind of move away from this boulder field to a flatter place. And the audio of this is so like dramatic, as he's like as cool as a cucumber, being, given all the information, and Buzz is there helping him to try to find a good safety spot. And they land, but not very without drama, because they only had so much fuel. And so they had to land within a certain number of minutes. And some accounts put that they had about 20 to 40 seconds of fuel left. So if Neil Armstrong delayed 20 to 40 seconds, they would have not sat down. They would have gone back up and went home without ever sitting on the moon. So that's how close it was for this to not even happen. But Neil Armstrong was this very cool customer, and so he landed and then gave those words, "The Eagle has landed." That's what this craft was nicknamed, the Eagle. And so everybody breathes a sigh of relief, and they're all okay, they're on the surface. So now they have to get ready. They got to get their suits on to go out onto the surface itself. And I think they had a little snack and a little nap because it was kind of stressful 3 days flying in space. And so then they head out one at a time. And so Neil Armstrong comes out first and gives those memorable words, "This is one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." Probably one of the best lines of the 20th century. And he becomes probably one of the most famous people in American history from this event. Buzz Aldrin comes out a little bit later, and he gives a pretty cool description of what he sees. He calls the vastness of the lunar surface magnificent desolation, which summarizes it pretty well because, I mean, look at this. Everywhere you look, gray rocks and more gray rocks. This is not a really amazing, verdant place. This is a dry, desolate desert with these gray rocks upon gray rocks. The only colorful things in any of these pictures is the stuff that the humans brought with them. We got the flags, we got the landers, they set up some scientific instruments, but they didn't stay very long. It was less than 24 hours they stayed on the surface of the moon. Basically, NASA was like, all right, you guys, you made it. Awesome. Come back home. You'll get like parades and all sorts of cool stuff. It's gonna be great. Big thing is come home. And because we wanted to do this. That was the main thing, was to get this done. Messing around on the moon wasn't really part of the plan. And so they didn't spend a whole lot of time on the moon, but they launched back up off of the surface, rendezvoused with Michael Collins, no problem, then kicked it into high gear and headed back to Earth. So what happens after that is somewhat interesting as well. So I've been an astronomer for more than 20 years, and whenever anybody hears that I'm an astronomer, they always have lots of questions, and those questions always start with this: "Hey Dean, I heard about this," or "Hey Dean, I heard about that." And so today's Hey Dean is going to be, what's your kind of most impressive thing that you think about when you think about the moon landing? And it's not kind of the actual achievement of actually landing on the moon. What I really like to think about, what I really kind of get into, is the psychology of astronauts, because there's a certain breed to the astronauts. There's certain things about them. Astronauts are the best of us. They're alphas, but they're also good at math. They're also really athletic. They're also know lots of languages. And so astronauts are these superhumans to me. And so I like to think about a little bit more of what was it like when they got back? Because getting there, this was what it was all about, was getting to the surface of the moon and getting pictures like this. And so we get a picture like this. This is actually a really important picture because this is not a picture you can get from Earth. The moon is tidally locked to us, so we only see one side of the moon at all times. And this is a picture that's showing some parts of the moon we can't see from Earth. And I can't even recognize them because I'm not used to them, but I think it's down here. I think that's the no, this part down here we can't see from Earth. And so I know I don't recognize it because I'm not used to this, but this is what the view that they got from the return trip from the moon. So first off, this is a picture, can't be fake because this is made by them as they came back home. And they got these amazing vistas of these craters up close. And so I kind of mentioned this before that, going to the moon, I think, would have changed me to think of how special Earth is, because this does not look like a place where I want to live. This is not a place where humans are going to be able to exist in an easy way. But the pictures are so incredible, and the technology that went behind this to make this all happen. This was such a big team effort to get this working. So as they're heading back home, I know they got to be starting to think about things. They got to start thinking about like, all right, how do you process what just happened? How do you process this adventure? How are we going to be when we get back to Earth? And so this is the site of the landing where they splashed down. And so with that 360-foot tall rocket, that was the only part that made it back from the moon. So there's the 3 little astronauts in there. Actually, there's 3 astronauts and a Navy frogman in the boat. That's who the 4th person is. So Neil, Buzz, and Michael, and I forget what the 4th guy's name from. He was on Earth. So anyway, he gets them. They get them out of the splashdown zone and into quarantine. Think about this. So they were on the moon. So it's 3 days to get to the moon. They spent about a day and a half, 2 days circling around and on the surface, then 3 days to get back. So they were only gone about 8 days, but they immediately went into quarantine. Now the idea with this was maybe they brought space germs back with them. I mean, nobody knew. Nobody had ever been to the moon before. We were taking all sorts of precautions because if there were moon germs and these 3 guys brought it back, man, we'd be in some big trouble. I mean, we kind of know how germs work nowadays, that's for sure. And so they took a lot of precautions. So they fly to the moon, they get hustled into this Airstream trailer where they live for a few weeks. And so it's not as glamorous as you might think. Like they come back from the moon, they're like walking around like, yeah, I'm Neil Armstrong, I just went to the moon. No, they had to like live in a trailer for a few weeks with each other. So hopefully they're getting along pretty good. But they do emerge as this kind of like super American heroes. And Neil Armstrong goes on tour, Buzz Aldrin goes on tour, Michael Collins goes on tour. They're like ambassadors to the entire world of showing like what science can do and that we can achieve all these great things. And they were like, loved around the entire world. But Neil Armstrong was like really big on this idea. He was this humble guy, almost like painfully humble, is that he always said, well, I'm just like the guy on the rocket. Like all these other people did all this stuff to make this happen. And wrong way. And so we have the 3 astronauts that went there. 73 countries were involved with this. They got all these moon rocks. They flew over 1 million miles. And more importantly, over 400,000 people worked on this. So this was a humongous achievement to be able to do this. But I find it really fascinating how Neil Armstrong reacted to this because he was, like I said, a very humble guy, very shy guy. He did not want the spotlight. And he lived right here in Cincinnati. He lived about 5 miles from my house. I never met him. I never saw him. He came to the Cincinnati Observatory a few times, but I missed him every single time he came by. And he kind of shied away from the public eye because, I mean, think about it. He's like the most famous guy in the world, and he's living right here in Cincinnati. He taught at the University of Cincinnati for a long time. So I always like to imagine like I'm signing up for classes, and I'm like with my buddies like, hey, there's this Armstrong guy. Have you heard anything about him? He's a good professor? Not too good? Good? What do you think? And it's like, all right, I guess I'll sign up for Armstrong. And you go in, there's Neil Armstrong. There's your professor. I've been like, oh yeah, that guy. Oh yeah, that would have been good. So he was this really humble guy, but I try to think about what would I do? And think about for yourself, what would you do? You go to the moon, you come back the most famous person on the planet. How would you use or not use that? I don't know. I have some real thoughts on that, but I'd be curious to hear what you all think. So definitely, if you like the show, give us some love, share this with friends and family, comment, let us know what you would do if you were to go to the moon. Well, first off, would you go to the moon? 3 days to the moon, 3 days back, not too bad. Let us know. Now, Apollo 11 was the first mission to land, but we had lots of other ones. There are 5 other ones. There was 12, 14, 15, 16, and 17. So total 6 missions landed on the surface of the moon. That's 12 people. If you're noticing one of them, I skipped number. That was Apollo 13 that never made it to the moon. Great movie about it. Check it out. All the disasters that almost happened, and they all made it back home. So Apollo 13 is one of those cool ones. But the last mission to get there was Apollo 17, which was more than 50 years ago. So are we going to go back or what? We're thinking about it, and not more than thinking about it. We have a crew that's starting to train to go around the moon and back, and eventually more people that are going to be landing on the surface of the moon themselves. And that's in the mission called Artemis. And I'm definitely going to be doing an episode on the Artemis missions coming up in the future, so stay tuned for that kind of stuff. And one of the other questions that I get a lot would be, hey, Dean, can we see the flag from Earth? Can we see the flag if we have a telescope? And the answer is no. The smallest crater we could see with our telescope at the observatory would be about 5 to 10 miles across. That's the smallest crater we can see. So yeah, a flag like that big, especially they planted it this way, so you'd be looking down on it, not going to work out. The only thing that can resolve things up in these missions is this. This is the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter that took this picture of the Apollo 11 landing site. So this is an unmanned spacecraft that's been circling around the moon for a very long time. I can't remember when they launched it. It seems like it's been there forever, but it's still delivering some really great pictures. And if you look very carefully, right there, that is the lander that is still there, the leftover parts that they left on the surface way back in 1969. So that's about all we can tell. There's some zoomed in pictures where you can see the tracks where they walked, and all their footprints are still left there on the moon. But this is the best we can do, and this is with a satellite basically circling around the moon itself. Thanks for staying up all night with me. I hope you enjoyed this trip to the moon. If you like this episode, definitely, like it. Comment, share, subscribe. We'd love to have you follow along with us as we stay up all night a lot of times. So I hope you enjoyed this trip to the moon, and come back again and stay up all night with me.